Well, hey there, record nerds. Many of you know by now the magic of Groove Washer, the best record cleaner in the world. The Groove Washer G2 fluid is the best record cleaner money can buy, and thank goodness it doesn't take much. Record cleaners at groovewasher.com start at $15, and bundles are available which will last you for years of record cleaning enjoyment. Go to groovewasher.com, enter checkout code VinylGuide10 and get a discount on everything they sell at groovewasher.com. If you're not cleaning your records, you're not hearing the full sound, and you're putting your records and stylists at risk. Sort yourself out at groovewasher.com, 10% off with checkout code VinylGuide10.
This is Lisa Fancher from Frontier Records, and I'm going to drop a whole bunch of names of my famous friends, such as Ian Mackay, Jello Biafra, etc., and regale you with all kinds of stupid stuff. I'm talking to Nate on the Vinyl Guide.
Do you listen to and collect vinyl records? Well, you're in luck. Welcome to the Vinyl Guide, the podcast made for record nerds like yourself. Here's your host, the biggest record nerd of them all, Nate Goyer.
Well, hey there, peoples. It's Nate. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening. I hope you're well. And a special shout out to everyone out there who is sharing these episodes, putting them on Facebook, on Instagram, tweeting them out on Twitter. That's a huge help. It really is. Gets our podcast out there and right in the hands of the people who will enjoy it most, the vinyl collectors and the music nerds. That's a huge help. So thanks for everyone who is sharing this podcast. Also, huge thanks to everyone on our Patreon page, our patrons at patreon.com/vinylguide. You're getting something very special this week, all you. So make sure you check that feed. There's going to be a little something extra for you, including an extended interview from today's episode, which I'm about to tell you about. Now, this week on the Vinyl Guide, we are welcoming Lisa Fancher, founder of Frontier Records and vinyl record enthusiast and collector. I think anyone with an appreciation of vinyl and or punk rock and music history will enjoy this conversation. Lisa is brilliantly funny. I had such a great time talking with her and getting a ton of stories from behind the scenes and the history of Frontier Records. As you'll hear in the interview, Lisa talks about a whole bunch of things, including starting the record label, carrying the early Frontier Records vinyl from store to store in the back of her Ford Pinto, signing the Circle Jerks, recording the Adolescents LP, getting the content and distributing the output of the Danger House record label, getting a visit from the FBI regarding the song lyrics of Suicidal Tendencies, restoring the classic Frontier Records LPs, her special vinyl archive, and heaps more. Now, Lisa is incredibly charming, and I think you'll all enjoy this interview. And if you want to hear more, there's an expanded interview with Lisa available only to patrons of this show at patreon.com/vinylguide. Go up there now, join our community. You can be hearing the extended interview with Lisa, plus a bunch of other extended interviews with past guests as well, and you get early access to episodes. Right now, you can even go up and check out next week's episode of the Vinyl Guide with our very special guest. That's going to be special, and it's only for patrons of the Vinyl Guide. Patreon.com/vinylguide. Go up there now, join the community, support us, and you'll be enjoying the extras immediately. And if you enjoyed today's conversation and like hearing tales of record labels and punk rock, well, you are in for a treat because we've got a ton of other episodes of the Vinyl Guide you may want to check out, including episode 220 featuring Tom Hazelmeyer of Amphetamine Reptile Records. Episode 206 of the Vinyl Guide features a conversation with Sub Pop Records founder Bruce Pavitt. Episode 171 of the Vinyl Guide, we talk to Matt Sullivan of Light in the Attic Records. Episode 150 of the Vinyl Guide, we have on the show Neil Sugarman of Daptone Records. Episode 60, we talk to Ben Blackwell from Third Man Records. Episode 100, we talk to mega record collector Henry Rollins, and hundreds more episodes which you can see at thevinylguide.com. Check us out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Sonnet, or wherever you get your podcasts. And with that, let's get into our conversation with Lisa Fancher of Frontier Records. This week on the Vinyl Guide, we are welcoming Lisa Fancher, owner and founder of Frontier Records. How are you doing today, Lisa?
I am excellent. It's the end of my day on a Friday long weekend, so I'm having a little Irish coffee.
Oh, all right. Are we going to get a tipsy Lisa today?
That's right. It'll help me remember things, I hope.
Okay. Well, we're taping this, so yeah, it'll all come back in the court documents. So I suppose I should start this episode by thanking you for putting out all those records that are still in quite high rotation in my house. Is it fair to call Frontier Records a punk label?
That's a tough one because the stuff that's sold is punk rock, but the stuff that's really, really great also, I should say, is not punk rock, like Thin White Rope and other bands that I put out after that. But if you never heard of those bands, that's understandable, but people would have heard of the punk rock one. So sure, go ahead. Call it punk rock.
Well, I don't want to slap a label. How would you describe Frontier to someone just getting familiar with it?
Gosh, if you were a Lyft driver, I'd probably say it was a punk rock label too, just to make it quick.
And get out of my car.
And I put out all these other records for 3 decades that you don't even know who the heck they are.
Right.
But curiously, I did a live. I don't know what you call it. It's you watch a movie. So we did the Elliott Smith documentary, and then you did a live Twitter thing, and so I did that Sunday morning. And I don't think a lot of people know that I put out the first Elliott Smith stuff under Heat Miser. Maybe not anybody.
I did not know that.
There you go.
Okay.
And because I spent so much time in the Northwest with the Fellows and the Dharma Bums, and Jeremy Wilson brought me the Heat Miser, and I was like, oh my God, amazing.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. So let's definitely explore that. But first off, what got you into the music business?
I was a big fan of Phonograph Record Magazine and Cream Magazine, of course, but Greg Shaw was in my hood because he was in Burbank and I lived in a place called Sun Valley. And I just started writing Greg Shaw and bothering him. I was trying to, I should write for PRM. I think I was like 13 or 14 or something. And I don't know where I got the ideas from, but I would do that. Anyway, we were friends.
Greg Shaw Bomp, right?
Yeah, Greg Shaw Bomp Records, legend. Speaking of legendary record collectors, but I'll tell you about that later. Anyway, he was very generous with his time and just records. Like I'd be over his house and he'd be like, hey, have you heard of AC/DC? There's a white label single of Can I Sit Next to You, Girl? And it wasn't like the heavy metal one at all. It was like Vanda Young, and maybe one of those guys played on it. But he'd be like, here, have this, or he was big friends with everybody in Australia. Like, have a copy of the Saints first single. They were all white labels, of course, because everybody had to send it straight to Greg to whatever to write about it or something. So,
in fact, that Saints single, I'm Stranded, I think currently costs more than my car. So,
oh my God. You know what's really sad is there's been many times over the years where I had to sell records just to keep going forward, and that was one of them, and I'll never get another.
Yeah. Well, you can. I guess you would need to give quite a hefty sum. Okay, all right. Sorry.
I can't get it free and then pay $1,800. I don't know what your car's worth, but I just can't do it.
Not that much. Okay, sorry. Keep going. Record collecting.
Record collecting. So Greg Shaw was like my entryway, but I would also go to the Capitol Records, the famous Capitol Records swap meet. I would take the bus there in the morning. I never realized how just generally foolhardy I was. I'd get up, it was dark, and I would go take the bus and go buy records there. And it never occurred to me that anything could happen to me or, people do terrible things. But anyway, I would go there and I'd buy lots of records. And, I met a lot of people I still know now. And but how did it lead me to the music biz? Well, working for Greg, I just kind of knew the steps of how you took bands in the studio and all that. So after having fanzines, after writing, for Bomp and everything, I was like, I'm going to put a record out. Because I just didn't have any idea what to do with myself. And It took me, I don't know, more than a year, about a year and a half to get the first record out in March of 1980. And there I was in the music business. And I never expected to be or anything. I didn't know. I just had no idea what I would ever do. And, 40 years later, I should probably have a career of some kind.
The first release on Frontier's Flyboys, right?
Yes, that is number one. March 1980, and little known because everybody thinks the first record I put out is a Circle Jerks. But if you look at the number, it's 1002. But I took the Flyboys in the studio, and it just took I didn't know what I was doing, and I got paid very sporadically at Bomp, so I would just have to save up a bunch of paychecks to do more recording, sure. And it took a very long time. And then they broke up before the record ever came out.
Oh.
So the whole thing was just super duper. Like, they actually told me in person it was nice. I was working in the mail order part of Bomp, and they came in and delivered the bad news. Not the exact same day I got the records from the printer, but something along those lines. And I was like, awesome. But it was just, it was like one of those things that, I hadn't run up my credit cards or borrowed it from anybody. So I was like, no harm, no foul.
Wow, that's very, that's an attitude that very few people would have. I imagine going through all that pain to be able to put out a record. It's your first, the first monkey you're shooting into space, and all of a sudden it disintegrates.
Yeah. And in your mind, they're going to be like, they're going to be bigger than the Screamers and the Weirdos. And then nobody bought it all. It was just tanked out hard.
Well, I salute your tenacity, because that would have killed most people. But before we move on from from those early days, what were you doing at Bomp? What was the environment like at Bomp, and what did you learn from Greg?
Well, I always say this about Greg. I learned what not to do. He was a very colorful character, like so intelligent. I don't even know if you could measure his intelligence. He was so intelligent, but he was just like, would come in the office in a mad panic because like his oil light was on, and we'd be like, "Well, put oil in it," and he'd be like, "I don't know how to do that. What am I? I don't put oil in." Just like he was just on a whole astral plane of his own. But it was very colorful over there. There was just records. I started out by working in the record store right straight out of high school, and we got in everything. I mean, because Greg knew everybody. Like, we got in, the Damned, New Rose before anybody had it. We got every single record. We would get it straight from England. Mm-hmm. So again, I know people that I still know, but like every single person in every single band, everybody from, the Bags to the Dickies to whatever, all came in to buy the records. So that was the store. And then I went over to work at the wholesale division, and I did mail order. They just kind of put me in whatever department, whatever needed to be done. One time I was a bookkeeper. That was really tragic because I can't even kind of add and subtract. So that was the saddest job I ever had.
Okay.
And then if Greg saw that there was money in the account because checks hadn't cleared, he thought you could spend it again. So it was madness. But, Susie is and was a good friend of mine. And there was never a huge amount of people working there, but it was, it was a super duper environment. And if you're a vinyl collector, I mean, I kept myself alive from the records. I had the first Misfits single, whatever. I would just take home one of everything, and I'd be like, oh my God, I didn't remember I owned this. So,
Were you involved in the production of the records at that point? Did Greg at some point say, hey, Lisa, can you help, press
really,
this record?
No. That was one thing where I really was not involved with it, but I knew what you did. You know what I mean? I was like, I would see the bills, like, this is what a studio is, and this, everybody's seen in a movie what engineering is and producing, but like they actually had a graphic artist that was in one of the offices, so I had him make up the Frontier logo, and and I used all of Greg's manufacturing things, which actually didn't behoove me that much because they were all mad at him because he almost never paid the bills.
Right.
So I'd be asking them for credit, and they'd be like, "You work for Shaw, you're never gonna pay." So then I would just kind of, make my own way and, gradually left all of those things so they wouldn't ask me about Greg or anything.
What were the other labels that were in business and around in that community? I imagine, was Slash around at this point, or SST?
Slash was around. I couldn't tell you when they first put a record out, but I don't know if Danger House preceded them by, a month, or if they were concurrent. And the Danger House guys, I knew they would bring in their releases. Actually, most bands would just bring them into the store when I was there. So I knew Pat Garrett, and I knew David Brown, and obviously they're still friends of mine because I rep the Danger House label.
That's on my list to ask you about because and so they would sell their records on consignment or something like that?
Yeah, they would bring them in on consignment and hope they got paid. I know I'm jumping around all over the place, but when I worked at the wholesale thing, Jello and his manager, I can't remember her name. They came in and they handcuffed themselves to what's normally my desk, and they wouldn't leave until Greg wrote a check. And Greg hid out for a really long time, and they wouldn't leave. And I knew Jello a little bit. He was our customer, Eric Boucher, and the whole thing was embarrassing and funny at the same time. But Greg finally wrote a check and like threw it at him. Was like, "Get out of here," and the check bounced. So
a flaw in the plan.
But he could have just done that, hours earlier. He could have just written a bad check many, many hours earlier than that. But I still know Jello. I talked to him on the phone. Nobody's got that voice. Why he's not the king of voiceovers? Why he's not the Patton Oswalt guy? I don't know.
Yeah. He should have his own Pixar character or something.
Yeah,
but he wouldn't play ball though. He would be like, "No, that's Disney." He would just
be a thorn in their side. He does. The last thing he wants is money. So
yeah.
But you could pay him in records or something. Give him a Desktop's credit card or something like that, and then he'd be happy.
So I always saw Frontier Records as really quite professional and polished, especially compared to a lot of other releases of the day. So you were immediately from record number one investing in multicolored sleeve art, which is not cheap, especially if you don't have an investor helping you with the bills.
No, it wasn't cheap at all, but I was lucky. I made use of Bomp's designer, Diane Zinkavage. Mm-hmm. So, we would sneak my jobs in around when she wasn't doing things for them, which wasn't all that, it wasn't a full-time job. But I think I was inspired by the Danger House guys because those sleeves were just so incredible. Every time a new thing came in, we were just like blown away by how good the graphics were. And then there was other certain labels, which I won't mention their name, where I'd be like, this looks like crap. I mean, you can still be punk rock, but not just look like you drew it yourself, just like it's a shitty flyer.
Right.
So I took it real seriously, and I wanted to use really good photos from the scene, Ed Culver, Glenn Friedman, Jenny Lenz, whatever. I wanted to use the best photos that I could get. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was still DIY, but I just wanted it to look good.
How much DIY was it? Like, for example, if we go to like the Adolescents or Circle Jerk, I mean, were you guys stuffing records into sleeves or the inserts and things like that, or was that all done at the manufacturer?
I may have had a teeny bit of credit, but I basically had to pay for everything up front completely.
Right.
So I just needed the money from the last record, a check to come in from Gem or something, and then pay that, pay those bills so that I could, get a bit of credit. I don't think I ever had more than $3,000 to $5,000 because, again, I worked for Greg for the early years, and they were like, nope. But So yeah, it was super DIY. But I didn't stuff the things, but I did drive them around because, not to toot my own horn, they were pretty hard to keep in stock. So the second they were done, I would have to go pick them up at Rainbow and then drive to like Long Beach and West, go to Rhino and just drive it all over in my sweet, sweet Pinto.
Oh.
And, you could fit a lot of records in it. It wouldn't even go over 45 if it was empty, but with records in it, you can imagine how delighted people were on the freeway.
Oh, and it has that big back window too, so you need to make sure the sun doesn't hit the boxes.
Get them all nice and melty while you're on the way.
Hot vinyl. So
I want your hot vinyl.
So you release the Flyboys, and they immediately break up, or even possibly a little bit before.
And know what? They weren't popular anyway, so it didn't do them. It did nothing for their career.
That's fine. So at that point, that is Frontier LP 1. Frontier LPs 2, 3, and 4, Circle Jerks, Adolescents, TSOL. At that point when you were doing the Flyboys record, did you already have line of sight to the next few releases?
No, not in the least. I did the Circle Jerks, and obviously that went pretty well. And I just heard about that word of mouth that they had a record that they wanted to put out and that was done. I didn't have anything to do with recording it. They completely did it on their own.
Tell me a little bit about that, because I didn't realize that that was already recorded and then you guys just got the tapes from it.
Yeah, they had a producer guy named Kerry Markoff, and they did a place called Bird Studios. And I heard they were shopping it around. I'm only guessing. Obviously, you would have gone to Slash, and they were in the Decline film. So I really don't know why that didn't happen. It's a weird thing that I never asked them why. Why weren't you signed to Slash? And they already hated Posh Boy because they had done a track or at least one track for like Rodney on the Rocks. They hated him. So there just wasn't that many options. So I like to think that, they wanted to be on Frontier, but there wasn't a lot of choices. So, yeah, so it took quite a while for me to put that together. I put the art together, and then I needed to press X amount, and the pressing plant was messing me around. I should have gotten it out. I think we made the deal in June of 1980. It should have come out in 2 months. It didn't come out till November. And then it just kind of exploded. It just kind of ridiculous. I was working in a record store called Vinyl Fetish, and it was just nuts. Like, everybody wanted it. And then the Adolescents had also recorded for Posh Boy. I heard them on Rodney, and I just thought they were the greatest thing in the world. I just never dreamed I'd even have a shot at talking to them. And I got a call while I was at Bump from Frank from the Adolescents. And he was just quizzing me all about it and how do records work and how do you make a record. And I would just totally bullshit at him because I made the Flyboys record, but I wasn't sure how it would work with Orange County.
Right.
So I was like, oh, yeah, we'll take you in the studio and, just ridiculous. And but then again, he was 16, so he thought, I was some big record biz shark. And so, yeah, we just made a deal to go in the studio, and they recorded that record in all of 3 days in beautiful Sun Valley. I should mention that the music biz had basically pretty much collapsed in the late 70s. Mm-hmm. So you had these studios that were like beyond state of the art, and you could just get them for absolutely nothing, especially if you paid cash or paid up front.
Okay.
And so we went in, made the Adolescents record. So those two right in a row where people were kind of like, oh yeah, what's going on? I still had offices. I'm pretty sure I couldn't afford to move out of my parents' house. I think I still lived at home at that point, 1980. We made the Adolescents record in the very beginning of 81.
Now, the Adolescents record must be your biggest seller to date, yeah? I mean, that's been in print for 30-something years.
Believe it or not, the Suicidal one was bigger just because it was, it had the overground thing of, they were on Miami Vice and it got played on K-Rock and things like that. But in terms of being beloved, I would say that's the most beloved record, that everybody talks about when they grew up with that record and skated to it and whatnot.
I was just listening to it last night with my my newly teenage son, and he was digging it too. So it transcends the time. So now that album cover of the Adolescents is just iconic and it's just simple. Whose idea was that?
It was a bit of Tony. We were all besotted with, that was the early days of generic packaging when you go to Ralph's and they would have like cigarettes and things. So we were besotted with how genius that was. So I think Tony said he wanted something really generic, and then Diane ran with it, the design. But I loved that combo of colors that made your eyes hurt. So it just all fell together, because I think the Adolescents were thinking maybe just black and white or, whatever, just simple colors. And I was like, what if it also made, because their name is so huge on it. I was like, what if it made your eyes hurt? And we were like, that's cool. Yeah, and then we just, Glenn's photos on the back were just super great as well. And, those two, the CJs and the Adolescents covers were just, they couldn't have even been any better.
That always impressed me, that, and even TSOL. It felt like a really interesting package that wasn't super slick, but it also wasn't some of the labels that just kind of a little bit too homegrown on some of the labels. So Frontier always seemed like, okay, these are people with taste and a budget to be able to put out some. And you must have picked up some of that by working at record stores and just seeing what records sold, which ones moved and grabbed attention.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, you thought of things then in the big format, you saw it on the rack and you're like, I want people to just walk right up to that and go, that's why I use such loud colors and everything. Like, what is this? Because at the same time, it was sort of the early days of goth, so things from England were very, punk was over and everything was sort of black and white and spooky, and I wanted it to be really, really SoCal.
Flyboys was not a success, but Circle Jerks was. Was that a bit of a surprise for you?
Yes and no, because I knew that they were bubbling under. You could just tell, like, everybody was just super about that. You know, they didn't draw thousands of people, but you could just, you could tell they were going to be the other big band besides Black Flag. So I was really glad, just the nerve of me calling them up and be like, I'll put your record out. And I remember them going, who the hell are you? And then I got, they were basically vetoed it just because, like, I had no track record. Like, hi, I put out a record that failed, but they just didn't have a whole ton of options. So, we worked out in advance, and the rest is history.
So Circle Jerks, after Group Sex, they moved to Faulty Products for Wild in the Streets. Did that sit well with you? Did it feel like a betrayal, or were you okay with that?
I wish I could have hung on to them, but I didn't blame them in the least, because clearly Faulty was the move to make. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It's like they have international distribution, and they have Miles Copeland. A bunch of my friends work there. So I couldn't say, like, that would be a horrible move for you guys to make. It's like, if you're in a band, the point is, I think, to, have people hear you without, being told what to do or selling out or.
Right.
It was to be a pattern that was repeated over and over again. I signed the 3 o'clock for several records, but mostly I just did one-offs. That made it so much easier to work with bands.
Right.
Here's a 7-year deal. I live with my parents. Here's your contract.
But you did have, like, a lawyer involved? I mean, did you have something official drafted?
The fool that I was, I used a copy of Greg's contract. And sometimes it worked out in my favor, and other times, he would just copy and paste. So he just had a file full of them, and I'd be like, here, read this if you don't like it. And, I don't even know if most people took it to lawyers. And I was happy to tweak it, but I should have for those early records. I didn't have any money for lawyers. I was busy thinking about graphics and, cool stuff like that. But at least I had a contract. Because certain people like Robbie Fields from Posh Boy didn't have contracts, and it's real hard to enforce something or even discuss anything because you just lose it.
Okay.
See also SST.
Oh, we just had Tom Hazelmeyer of AMREP on, and he was talking about that he absolutely had documentation between him and the bands because he knew that he would be treated like a farm team if he didn't.
Yeah.
And that's a model time and time again. So now with Suicidal Tendencies, again, did you expect the album to become that popular?
Actually, no, I did not. And I'll tell you, a preface to this story was that I absolutely hated those guys because, they really genuinely, I can't say all of them or which people or whatever, they were genuinely like just total thugs. Mm-hmm. And when they played the Music Machine, somebody in Suicidal like broke in their dressing room and like stole a bunch of guitars a la what the Sex Pistols used to do, which I thought was hilarious until it happened to one of my bands. So my friend Glennie Friedman kept bringing me demos by them, and I was like, fuck those guys. And, but then, he kept working at it. He just really saw something in them. Mm-hmm. So he kept bringing me demos, and then I heard Institutionalized, and I was like, okay, I cannot deny that this is a super duper song. And all the songs they were proposing to do for my album were good. Mm-hmm. And so we took them in the studio. It was uneventful. They were all pretty mellow guys.
No theft.
No theft, no violence, nothing like that. Mike absolutely despised me. I don't know what I did, but I think it was because of his brother. I guess he'd signed some bad things when he was a skater. So he just, anybody that puts a contract in front of you is bad. Something like that. I don't care. I made one record with him again, but that record was a total stiff. It was dead in the water, and everybody who liked punk rock hated that record because it kind of was, early hip hoppy, maybe a little bit of metal thing. So the regular punk crew had some opinion on them, like they were jerks or their fans were jerks or something. So the record was absolutely 100% dead in the water. And then Glenn just wouldn't let it go. He was their manager, and he just wouldn't let it go. So he was the one that paid for the video. He got the band, I don't know, they played some shows or something. Because I was like, why would I spend money on a video for a record that I'm still upside down on 3 years later? Anyway, early days of MTV, they started playing it like crazy. And then suddenly, like, they were on the map. Like, it just was like a whole new world.
And as I understand it, the song I Shot the Devil was originally titled I Shot Reagan.
It says inside the record,
Right.
on the outside of the packaging. And I got a visit from the FBI at my mom's house. I was visiting her one day, and I think that was the only address on file for me. Mm-hmm. And they just asked me a whole bunch of questions about, did they really want to kill Reagan and all this stuff? And I'd be like, it's just a song, dude.
Right.
So anyway, my mom wasn't, she pretty much had a belly full of all, a band called the Circle Jerks, a band called Christian Death. She wasn't religious, but it was like, come on, because she liked Roberta Flack and stuff. Can't you do something nice? I'll be like, nope. Sorry, Mom.
I'm assuming that influenced the change of the song title. Like, what was that meeting like? What was that discussion like with Suicidal after that FBI visit?
No, it was the same. Like, I think we knew that we were going to get, I don't think we ever changed the art. I think that, I think I foresaw that coming, it's like, you can't even joke about that about a president. So we just, made the outside the way it said, but I don't think we ever changed any artwork or anything.
All right.
I don't think I would have, but I want to know who was the creep that narked us out to the FBI.
Because the lyric sheet is I Shot Reagan, but the record label is I Shot the Devil.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that, I think that was my concession, was like, we can't put that on the outside of the record, or it's, I'm just never going to get any. And it didn't honestly surprise me when however the FBI heard about it. But think about how, they're taking a drubbing, the FBI. That's pretty cool that they went to some house in Sun Valley about a stupid punk rock record. It's like, yeah, they're going to shoot the president and they put on a record. They're really, criminal masterminds there.
Well, yeah, tax dollars paid for that visit too. So
yeah, it's like tweeting out like, I'm going to kill the president. Oh, darn it.
Did you ever hear from Pepsi about the song Institutionalized?
No, which is like, it still haunts me to this day. Why in the world would you not use that for Pepsi? Like, they tried so hard to be hip with all their campaigns over the years. So I just don't get it at all. I wish I don't know how you call on the phone in their marketing thing. It's like, what is wrong with you people? It's so obvious.
Yeah, you heard from the FBI, but you didn't hear from Pepsi at all.
You just have all these people skating, but like really expensive version, they could skate in Las Vegas over the tops of casinos, I don't know.
Yeah.
They're stupid.
Suicidal, they re-recorded the album.
They did. I did it. Everybody's welcome to re-record a record after 5 years. Mm-hmm. Nobody usually likes it, and they didn't like that one at all. Right. It was not. I think they thought they would stop buying mine, but that didn't happen.
And are you still distributing Suicidal alongside Adolescents? And
Still got them. But Suicidal, punk was already becoming kind of tedious. Like, it was just kind of, everybody was a rehash of a rehash of a rehash. Mm-hmm. So I went straight from Suicidal to 3 o'clock, which were originally called the Salvation Army. Yeah. And that pretty much scraped all the punk rock people off of me, because they were just, ew, this is terrible.
I really think the 3 o'clock is interesting. They were originally called, as I understand it, Salvation Army, but
yes.
there was some sort of legal issue with the actual Salvation Army charity. Is that right?
Yes, they were playing with 45 Grave once upon a time, and they played like every night of the week, but they were unlucky enough to be on a marquee at the Whiskey when someone in the Salvation Army was, driving home or driving back, whatever, and they saw it, and they're like, you can't be called that. And they figured that they were probably just super offensive because they were playing with 45 Grave. So we got a letter from their lawyer, and it was like, yeah, you can't use that. And I was like, ugh, because Red Cross had gotten away with it for a fair amount of time. But then they got better as well. But Salvation Army, we couldn't use Salvation or Army. There was no part of it that they were having. At least Red Cross could just put a K in it and call it a day. But anyway, 3 o'clock, because, that's a fine name.
The album was already pressed, and there was a sticker that had to go over the cover of the album, over the text Salvation Army that said 3 o'clock, if I recall that right.
Yeah, the ones we had left, they were benevolent, and they did not make me destroy them. We had to put a big, ugly sticker over it. So once you pulled off the shrink wrap, then, you still had your Salvation Army record. But it wasn't a big seller either. That record, I got to say, It didn't sound very good. The cover was cool, but even though I did it with Tom Wilson, who'd done, the Adolescents and TSOL and everything, it just, I don't know, the musicianship wasn't really up there that much. So anyway, it was kind of dead in the water. And then the 3 o'clock, Michael had already been moving forward anyway. He was kind of getting away from just being like a garage band into, doing more commercially type music.
What's the record that Frontier put out that it really broke your heart? You thought everyone should be listening to this, and it just didn't have a response.
Maybe. I mean, people still like Thin White Rope a lot, but I put out, I don't know if you ever heard the EIEIO record called Land of Opportunity. That's such a good record, and it just, they were kind of part of that whole, does it have a name like the Jayhawks, that kind of thing? Okay. Maybe it was just alt rock or alt country. And they just kind of got buried alive by much lesser bands. And they were so unbelievably good. And that record's just an absolute masterpiece. It's not even in print now. I only have it available digitally. Didn't sell. Spent a fair amount of money marketing it and just couldn't get any traction on that at all. So.
Okay. That's EIEIO, Land of Opportunity.
Yeah.
Is that on the streaming services? Or
yeah. It's on streaming for sure, yeah.
I'll give that a go today.
Yeah, check that out.
Well, you did wind up with the Danger House label. How did you end up getting your mitts on that? I was always big fans of those guys, and I obviously all the singles, and it's just like a finite thing, they never got terrible or put out shitty records. And I wanted to do a comp, and Danny Benaire from the 3 o'clock just was so patient. He would come to the office and just, call those guys, and then, a few months would go by or a few weeks, because the principals did not like each other. They had not spoken since like 1980. Anyway, fast forward, I finally put out a comp in it was 90 or 91. Mm-hmm. And David said he didn't have any of the tapes, but, some of them I took off of records, and some, like some things he had. There was some alternate takes. I could do a volume 3, but there's just not really, those songs are so short, there's just not really enough to fill out a record. So I've just kind of been always like, what should I do with this stuff? Mm-hmm. But I put out the Yes LA record. I don't know if you saw that, but yeah, excellent. That's the clear one with.
That's the clear one. That was I bent my brain around that for years, because I just couldn't think of anybody that could do it that wouldn't, get the ink on the grooves, or do it wrong, or like, oh, I thought you wanted it on the groove side or whatever. So I just thought about it forever, and I was like, I should just leave it be. And then I met this super cool couple from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And they were like, oh, yeah, we could do that. No problem. And they got so obsessed with it. They found every single element of the record, like exactly like those silver foil seals, the exact weight of the paper. I sent them mine, the exact weight of the plastic bag, because I could only find these flimsy, crappy ones, or they didn't fold over or whatever. And it couldn't have been any more. It was the same, the exact same color inks. There was 4 different colors of it, color combos.
Wow.
And they just knocked it out of the park. I only did 1,000. Altogether, there was like 250 of each color.
Okay. You mentioned some of the master tapes exist and some don't. Is that specifically on Danger House? Do you still have all the master tapes of the rest of the Frontier catalog?
Yes, I do. Some of them I had to bake to do like the X anniversary or something, and they just disintegrated. Mm-hmm. But I have the box, and I have the dust. I have the handwriting from someone writing on it, but yes, I have them all. It'd be super great if I could afford cold storage, but unfortunately for me, the era that I recorded my records was the worst. I used Ampex tape, which was the gold standard, but it was the stuff that shed and became garbage. Whereas if your record was recorded in the 50s, 60s, in the 70s, the tape was fine.
Yeah. I've heard, I think it was Bernie Grunman, he was on the show, and he was talking about in the early 70s, they stopped using whale oil in tape.
Oh.
And from about tapes from about 1972 to the late 90s, those are the ones, like you said, they age horribly, and it's because of the lack of that whale oil, apparently.
Well, I'm glad I helped save the whales, but
there you go.
Man, those whales ever screw me up. You'd think they would think of Plan B. I never heard the whale oil thing. That's so rad. I just thought it was like, cheaper, lighter, something, whatever.
Yeah.
But it was whale oil. Gosh darn it.
Good for whales, bad for punk rock.
That's right. Bad for the punk rock. But it's not as bad. The whale thing is not as bad as having Universal store your tapes and burn them all up.
Yeah. I'm glad they weren't storing the whales. So you have all the master tapes or have transferred them. So all the music is safe.
Yeah.
Yes. How about the artwork?
The artwork, I even have the mechanical boards, which I had to go revisit those. I was making more suicidal CDs. You get sloppy after a while if you can't find like the film. Nobody prints from film anymore. So we would just keep using a CD and then a CD of a CD. And I looked at it. It was so bad. I just couldn't believe like how shitty and mashed together the colors were and everything. Mm-hmm. So I had to pull everything out of my closet and see what I had to see if I had the, those original collages of all the shirts. Mm-hmm. And I didn't have actual photo collage pasted down, but I at least had really good negatives of it. So the graphic artist I use now most of the time scan that, and it looks brand spanking new. It's not all fudged together and all blurry and everything. So
beautiful.
Sometimes you got to do it, but yes, I have the pasted up things from until they didn't have boards anymore. Yeah, I have all. I don't throw anything away, and I'm always surprised at the stuff I find. Them be like, I didn't know I had this. On Instagram, which I don't think you follow me on Instagram, I found the paintings for the TSOL album cover. I was looking for Suicidal, and I'd be like, I'll be darned. Here's those two paintings. I was wondering where those went.
What collectibles do you have in your archives? Like, do you have test pressings and things that would make
I got all that stuff. I have props that people put in the videos if it was the video era. Mm-hmm. I have all kinds of stuff. I have the demo tape that Suicidal sent me that has institutionalized on it. I have letters from the Pixies manager. I just keep everything.
Now, you used Rainbow Records for all your record pressing. What was your experience like with Rainbow?
All of them, yeah. It was really sad, but it wasn't as sad as them closing. But overall, it was great. Like, believe me, I got stiffed by distributors all the time, and I was just completely screwed. And Steve would work with me, and he would let me pay it off over time. There was times when he put me on COD because I was like 2 years behind, but he was always cool. I have no complaints about him. If I had a chunk of money, I give it to them. But you have all the same bills, when you get stiffed, you have all the same bills. So if somebody like Steve hadn't worked with me, I probably would have gone out of business 10 times. Mm-hmm. But then they closed last October, which you may or may not have read all the stories of woe. But I have been in absolute hell because they were just in a big hurry to get rid of everything and get out of the building. So it's just like a tangled up mess. And I had to recreate a lot of stuff from scratch because their software files were so old. And like I said, nobody prints from film. So it took me like 4 months just to reactivate the good sellers so that I could sell records again. And it's still ongoing. Like I'm just gradually doing each record by record. I moved to a place in Virginia, so it'd be closer to my distributor, and they're super audiophile. Like they are beyond meticulous. They do so much better work than Rainbow. But
Furnace?
They've only existed for like a year. Furnace, yes.
Oh, yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You know Jen over there at Furnace?
Yeah, Jen's super vinyl lady.
She's the best.
Yeah. It's just been absolute hell on earth, like recreating everything and. Where's this? Where's that? We have to scan a label. It's just like always something. We have a giant grid with a checklist. Like I thought Weirdos were on the way. We haven't even started it. Nuts, so it's like that.
Well, what are the things that Rainbow would have? Like I imagine they have the plates. They have some of the artwork, but you said you now have copies of that artwork. Like,
they have the metal mothers. Stampers don't work from place to place, and they get warped in transit. So I had to take all the stampers and throw them away. So you have to make all new stampers and test pressings of everything. So just call that $300 a record right there. And that's not the end of the world. But you have digital files of like an album jacket, and they, maybe we realize that they didn't even send something, and then it's too late. Like they don't exist. Like there's nobody there. There's nobody for me to call and complain. It's just gone. So you have to go scan the best quality record you can without a bend in it. And I often realize I don't even have archive copies. Like I never thought about keeping an archive. Mm-hmm. Be like, are you kidding me? I don't have a Suicidal without a barcode on it. So I bought a lot of my own records. Very embarrassing. I bought a lot of my own records on eBay and Discogs.
People can check out the Frontier catalog at frontierrecords.bandcamp.com. Is that the best way?
That is the best way because we are rebuilding our website, and you know what that's like. It takes forever. So Bandcamp right now, everything's up, and it's up digitally even if you can't buy a physical copy. And T-shirts, we got everything on Bandcamp, and they're good folks too.
Mm-hmm. And I would highly recommend not only some of the, I'll say the blue chip releases from Frontier, Adolescents and the like, but also check out Black Randy and the Metro Squad.
For sure.
Absolutely love that record. Past the Dust, I Think I'm Bowie.
So good. And also Thin White Rope, that's my legacy stuff right there. All the Thin White Rope catalog is... If you haven't discovered it, discover it.
Lisa, thank you so much for coming on the show. And all those stories and tales you've been sharing are absolutely fascinating. I know the record nerds are going to love this, and the punk nerds are going to love this, and in many cases, that's two in the same. Again, I want to remind people to head over to frontierrecords.bandcamp.com. Pick up a few records. Again, I think Black Randy and the Metro Squad's great, but there's a whole bunch of other really interesting stuff up there. Christian Death, Thin White Rope, The Stimulators, the Weirdos. There's a Danger House. There's a couple of Danger House compilations. The original Red Cross with the boys wearing wigs. So again, check it out. That's at frontierrecords.bandcamp.com. Lisa, thank you again for coming on the Vinyl Guide.
Thank you.
All right, there we go. Lisa Fancher of Frontier Records. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Lisa. That was really fun. You are welcome back anytime to the podcast. That was such a joy. And by the way, for all you folks who are patrons of the Vinyl Guide, you can hear more of that interview, plus a heap of extras, if you go to patreon.com/Vinyl Guide. Sign up. It's a couple bucks a month. And give your old buddy Nate some burrito money and enjoy all the extras we put up there at patreon.com/Vinyl Guide. And that's it for this week's episode. Thanks again for tuning in. Please, please, please share this episode on your social medias. Put it on Facebook, put it on your Instagram, or tweet it out on Twitter. Let your friends know about the Vinyl Guide podcast so they can be as cool as you. They will thank you for it and probably shower you with money or beers, whatever you prefer, whatever your currency is. Please share the Vinyl Guide podcast. We'll be back with a brand new episode shortly. So until we talk next time, keep spinning. Cheers.
That's it for this episode of The Vinyl Guide. Send your thoughts to Nate at thevinylguide.com or follow or tag us on Instagram at Vinyl Guide. Until next time, keep spinning.